Hi, welcome friends. Thank you for joining me today on Motion Mondays here on Adobe Live. My name is Sin Lagos. I will be your visual mentor today, and we're going to be exploring Adobe Premiere. I love Adobe Premiere. I'm always discovering a little bit of a secret somewhere hidden in one of those compartments. So I'm excited to show you what we're going to be working on today. We're going to be exploring color editing. So let me play this for you. So we're going to be exploring color editing, and I want to know a question from you. So I'm really curious to learn, what is your favorite film when it comes to color inspiration? I know there's a lot up there, and probably there's one that comes top for me, but I'm curious to know, what is it for you? And please don't all answer Wes Anderson. We all know about Wes Anderson. So let me know on the chat. Hi everyone, I see Wade, I see Robert. So let me know in the chat the answer to this question. I know you watch movies. We all watch movies. So yeah, we're going to be editing this image. We're going to be editing several clips into different color creations. So the goal today is going to be, most of all, to explore something that feels like you have a stronger sense of the color control that you're having within Premiere, because I think there's a lot of correct ways to go about it, right? There's going to be a grand difference between color correcting for technical terms and then color for creativity and style. So those are more conceptual. They may be something that you're searching for when it comes to the emotion that video evokes through color, right? So we can't escape the symbolism behind adding a little bit of tint, green tint, that might give your film a different essence or a different emotion, right? So let's jump on here on our demo and start exploring color. All right, so I'm in Adobe Premiere, and I have set in here in my timeline several clips that I want to play with today. So we're not going to be building a coherent story. What we're going to be doing is treating different clips with different light conditions and different color palettes, and try to see what are the opportunities within our color options and color property changes that we can create here in Adobe Premiere. So different video clips here, really cool stuff. So I've organized them here for us to explore. Now, another thing I want you to know before we continue on is that I often find myself creating and editing within different workspaces. So for example, in here, we have different workspaces, and I started this workspace by going to color. So under color, this entire module will become focused on the Lumetri Color, your timeline, and your program monitor. So I've adjusted this just a little bit by pulling some of these edges, and it becomes fairly modular, right? It's kind of cool how it does that. So try it for yourself. At this point, I've saved this workspace for myself, and I know that this is something I can come back to under my saved workspaces. So it's right there. MU Sin Lagos, Medium Unlimited, Sin Lagos video streaming. You got to save your space, the ways that you like to work, right? Okay, so we have several clips here. Let's get started on our main clip. So this is one iteration of what we can create here, but I want to go through a couple of things. So I have three different sequences. We have match, curves, and effects. Those are the three things we're going to be focusing on today, ultimately with the goal of creating something that is creative. What I mean by that is that it's not bound to text specs, is more bound to concept forward, right? That's usually the idea and the separation between the two. So we're here in this in this video clip, really cool video clip in San Francisco. Wade was there. Remember that? In San Francisco, it was a really cool moment because I was exploring. We were all exploring after doing a really cool stream in San Francisco, exploring more of the city. And we came across this really cool carousel, and it just looks so pretty. And I got it at 120 frames per second, probably a little bit overshoot, unnecessary, but I got it in slow-mo, which is wonderful, right? You can see the lights, you can see some of those what's called bokeh lights, which is so nice. So immediately I want to jump into changing this color, transforming this color palette. And so what I've done here in my timeline is that in this sequence, I've also included a collection of images. So some of the images here, these are actual photos. They're not MP4s. They are images that I've brought in from Lightroom that I felt had different varieties of color palettes. So that I can use them as reference points for a color matching that we're about to do. So if you have a kind of a hand in post editing for photography, this could be a great way for you to bring in some of those color palettes into your designs. And I even brought in a recent generation I made in Adobe Firefly. So you can bring in any color palettes that you think might work. Okay, so the way this works is we're gonna go into our clip. This one's the edited version. Let's go into the unedited version. Stop it around there. It could be anywhere really, just have it selected. And then we're gonna go into the Lumetri Color. So here we are, Lumetri Color, holding Alt, we can actually close all the tabs. Holding Alt, we can, close all the tabs. All right, so let's go into this section right here. It's called Color Wheels and Match. Okay, so we got Color Wheels and Match here. And when you come into Color Wheels and Match, one of my favorite things pops up, which is the color wheels. Part of the reason why this is one of my favorites, even in places like Adobe Lightroom, is because it's the part that is often meant to be just creative. There is ways to use it for technicality, but it often means, hey, you've reached the point where we get to be creative. And hey, let's start in the creative part. Why not, right? So we have our three wheels. And in this section, in this dialogue, for some reason, we got squeezed in this other element, which is called match, which is in here. So we got color wheels and match. I always have to do this. Let me see if this works, so I can show y'all what I'm talking about. All right. Doesn't. Y'all, not cool. But in color wheels and match, we've got a match element, right? So if we go here into this button called comparison view, let's exit this. Comparison view, click it. We've got now two screens. On the left side, we're gonna get a chance to compare a color value and try to match it on the second screen, right? So this is our reference point. And I'm going to go find images that give a sound color that maybe I want to imitate. So for example, I might want to imitate this fella right here, who has a bit of that kind of mustard color, very sepia. I know that in my treatment of this image in Lightroom, I found myself adding a bit of those yellows in the shadows. So I want that translated onto this, and hopefully it can get me a little bit further than 0, right? So that's the idea. It's not, it doesn't have to be an exact match, but if it can get me somewhere further from the start, it would be wonderful. So I'm going to press apply match. So if you notice, we've done maybe 2 things: comparison view, apply match. So in a matter of 2 buttons, truly, you've been able to update your scenery. So let me see here, your color palette. So let's watch this. And if you want to see what it looks like without it, then you can come here and just turn off that color wheels and match. And you can see there how it looks, how it used to look. Lots of blues. Now it's a lot of warmth in it. Still hasn't been corrected when it comes to the light. There's still a lot of dark shadows, and we can still work on that, right? But it's so interesting that it got me to a certain flavor, so to speak. And that looks super cool. So I think I'm going to keep that color wheels and match, but I would be curious to see what would happen if I do a similar color wheels and match, but to a different scenario. So if I go into maybe this one right here and do comparison view, we can grab our cool fella here. Also in San Francisco, by the way, very close to this spot. Yeah, very close together. And we're gonna do apply match. And let's see what it gives us. All right, remove the comparison view, and we can see those hues again, those kind of like orangey hues on the shadows and a bit of on orangey hues on the highlights too. They're not like a true white. I do notice in my experience of using this, it often tackles it like a filter. And you know the difference, right? Like when you're doing a universal edit to your photo versus isolation where you're just targeting the sun and the flowers. So those are like yellow hues. It's going to be different from that. This feels like definitely a layer right on top. And in order for them to blend better, I often think it's helpful to come back to these color wheels and match and continue to play with the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows of those color wheels to be able to blend this effect together a little bit better. So looking that there's a lot of orange, maybe I want to bring in an opposite color into the shadows, into this scene. So I might go into the midtone and add a little bit of blue to kind of change that a little bit. And you can decide where you want to go with this. The best thing to do in these situations is to have a concept in mind. So if you want to create a bit of a vintage look, something that feels a little bit more pensive and thoughtful, depending on the story that you're trying to build, right? I imagine you have those ideas in mind to some degree. That's going to then inform your decision. For example, if I want something to be solemn, I can say, you know what? I'm going to reduce the speed of this so it feels even more so like I want you to think about it, right? So pensiveness. So you're matching those concepts to every action you create in Premiere, in anything you do, so that it makes a decision. Should it be faster? Should it be slower, more chaotic, more restless? Or should it be more happy and dandy? Not every edit needs to result in high saturation, hypercolor pop. It doesn't have to be that, right? Maybe footage is asking instead for you to do some kind of, how do I say, like recognizing the colors that exist there and highlighting those colors in there. So let's remove this Lumetri Color real quick so we can edit this scene. I was playing around with it in the beginning. So we've got a lot of blue here. Also a location in San Francisco, right in front of the stadium. And I like this very clean composition here. So again, I can investigate this further and I can say, oh, this is nice. I want it to be calm. Maybe I put a calm soundtrack in here at some point. So if that is the case, then I definitely want to slow it down. And I did during my production, during my recording, think, hey, I really like this to be slowed down. Maybe I should record it at 60 frames per second. So I did that. Let's make it slow and let's target some of these colors here. So in the concept of color wheels and match, we haven't left that. We just moved on to a different clip. We're still exploring color wheels and match. In the concept of that, let's go in here into Lumetri Color, do our comparison views and see if we can compare it to a different scenario. So let's try maybe one of these more blue hues. It's not going to give me a sunset, but it might understand that I want color, that I want warmth, and I want contrast. Let's put it to a test, because that is always a matter of finding the right match for it. So it looks here like it created a very subtle change. It just added greens into my hue. So let's try a different image here and see what else we can find. Maybe this one. Apply match. It's kind of an interesting experience to find yourself seeing what photos can I pull in that give me an intriguing result that I can start from, because this is never the end. I wouldn't constitute this effect as one button, it's done. It's definitely one of those things you want to continue on. So for example, if I want to continue on to the scene, you can see here that the midtones are all the way in the yellow, and that's too much for me. So I might bring it down closer to absolute white and discern, okay, I kind of want it there, but actually this little level right here is going to help me create that contrast back. And I want to have warmth, but I don't want to overdo it. So maybe I want to have a little bit of color back, or I want to add a little bit of teal in there because we love that teal. And in the shadows, then I can bring back some of that yellow, right? And this is just me being here. I've kind of transformed this image to something else. It isn't exactly the end of it, but it's definitely just by using this, we've shifted a lot of things here. Now, something that you must know about editing video clips, there is something we cannot escape. I try to escape it. It is not escapable. It's doing something fairly simple. It's called an S-log. So if you set up your video editing settings properly, where you're able to, at the most, you want to reach the highest dynamic range that your camera can achieve. So you want to have those settings in your file. Think of it as a file that has the best information possible. When you do that, this is a common practice. When you do that, you have the opportunity to use your brand's given S-log. So it's that simple. We have our settings right. We have a footage that we can add an S-log to, which is essentially going to improve the fidelity and dynamic range of your footage. You can see it already. You can see it in what we have right here. I'll zoom in so you can see there's so much more contrast. You want to add that at the beginning of everything if you have those conditions. But I wanted to show you just in case you were just playing around and you just want to get to know the different tools you have within Lumetri Color. But that will improve it. If you have that opportunity, definitely do it. So let's go into the effect controls. And we're going to see here that our Lumetri Color is now part of our effects controls, which is so interesting because you can also turn it off from here. So turn off the effect directly from here. You can also begin to stack several Lumetri Color effects. So for example, if we go back to Lumetri Color, which I have it at a Shift-7 shortcut for my own needs, I may then say, you know what? Let's not put the log right here in this one. Let's put it in a new one. So I'll add a Lumetri Color effect, and I'm going to then in here create the S-log that I said. What a difference. That just changes everything. All because I'm layering Lumetri Color effects. So what do I mean by that? When I go to Shift-5, we can see now, holding Alt, closing all of them, holding Alt, opening all of them, right? You can see now we have two Lumetri Colors, not just one. We have the one where we did the color wheels and match, and we have the one that has the S-log. Interesting, right? So even if you skip one of these two, just think about the concept of layering Lumetri Color effects. You would think it does it on its own, but there's a really intriguing factor of changing the order in which these are layered. So play around with that. There could be something there that could be a new find. For me, it was a bit of a secret on hidden unlocked game changer element that I was like, okay, how can I reconsider my order of operations, right? Like we have a workflow. We start from 1 to 2. But what if you start from 2 to 1 to 3? Kind of like that. And so you're changing the order of your workflow in the color workflow in Lumetri Color. So that is one of the things I love doing. Color wheels and match, super fun. And you get to have really different looks. And I think I might have accidentally created a Wes Anderson look. Did I? I think I was trying to avoid that and I ended up there anyways. Wade says, I do remember that. Looking great, by the way. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you like it. And Alejandro says, hello, everyone. Hi, Alejandro. Welcome. For folks who are just joining us, we are exploring colors, color secrets, color little Pandora's box, a good Pandora's box, within Premiere, so that we can explore different ways, creative ways to edit our video clips and transform our videos. And so Wade says, Midsummer Blade Runner is the answer to the question, what is your favorite film to use as inspiration for color? Which, honestly, it's a lot of fun to think of different inspirations that already kind of exist in real life. I can find inspiration in maybe a poster design that I can bring over here and start to play with. There's just so much that is out there in the world that you can explore. So I think I'm going to move on to a different footage here and explore. Here you go. Okay. And explore. We're going to be exploring curves now. So in the same video clips, how can we utilize curves to our advantage within the Lumetri Color? So let's explore curves. Let's go into the Lumetri Color. And I have a clip here. Somebody's playing in a San Francisco park. They're playing tennis. It's super cool. Okay, seems a little bit slow here. So I'm going to probably render that really quick so you can see. Render into out so that you can render your footage. It's often just kind of giving you a preview of the clips that you've imported. So anytime you feel a little bit of a lag, it's always helpful to then do this effect, this step, rendering. You can also hit enter and it's going to do the same thing. So we don't have to go in the menu here and edit it. But remember, it's based on your in to out points. So if you want this to take less time, you can shorten your work area so that it takes less time to render as well. Let's read the chat here. Awesome, folks. So I hope you're learning some of my favorite tools so far in Adobe Premiere that I use quite frequently in color editing. It is definitely one of those things where it is a matter of practice, and you do have to try it out in different footage, different video clips that have maybe they have a different color condition or light condition that could be wonderful for you to put together these clips and experiment in this way, because I may or may not have a reason for these projects, but this practice helps me navigate through Premiere and learn more about the tools that I have within Premiere, right? So that's kind of part of the goal here. All right, let's come back here to our demo. So we have this scenario here and they are playing tennis, and I wanted to use kind of the fence as a framing object in the foreground. So that's really cool. We're gonna go to a technical edit and go into S-Log3, and immediately that shifted into a more digestible clip that feels more like real life, right? So again, for the before and after of what that looks like, is kind of funny how intense the difference really is. So instead of, let's go back here, do S-Log3 for this one too, so you can see, wow, that's a big deal, right? So I do like having this as a foundational element to then continue on the editing process. So let's go into our levels here and play around with some of the options for some of these clips. So we have our curves. So curves are some of my favorites to explore because it writes the line of technical but also creative. So that's going to be really important in your thinking when you're changing some of these graphs. So the graph works like this. We have our shadow, we have our midtone, and we have our highlights. We have whites, we have blacks all the way at the end. If you want to target your shadows, you're going to want to bring this point, which we just created here. We're just going to have to bring this up or down, and just notice that there are limitations to how far you can push that. And the same goes for our highlights. We can bring them down, up and down in that way. A common graph is going to be always your S curve, because it's not just an S curve to be an S curve. It is actually simply creating more contrast by pushing the highlights and the shadows in opposite ways. So theoretically, you can also achieve a bit of opposite contrast, like an inversion, if you do the S the other way around. So if you want to get kind of funky with it, because sometimes that happens, right? We want to do that. So I think I have enough contrast there. I think I want to go into these clips and also isolate the creative side, which I think lies in the 3 different channels. We got red, green, and blue. So we have the RGB channels here within our curves graph. So we have the RGB curves. We're going to do the same thing. We're meddling with our highlights, mid-tones, and shadows. And if I change this a little bit like this, we get a bit of a green blue, like film 400, Portrait 400 look on it, which is nice, right? If that's kind of what you're going for. Perhaps it's like a brand thing. Maybe your brand is associated with that color. That could be a choice. That could be a decision. I need to know what is the decision, the reason why I'm coloring this in any way. I think coloring blindly is quite tricky. I don't know how that's achieved except coloring technically. But once you're coloring creatively, you need to know the why, right? I think that's the differentiator. So if I do the same thing to this one, you can see that blue hue come through on this as well. I love this moment when they're riding bike right into the street. It's perfect. And you can see a non-treated of the same location, same light conditions with that, how different that can look. This was cool. He let me film him doing his push-ups. And then this is all the same light conditions, right? So what we can do here, now that we've changed a few treatments here on this clip, which happens to me the same as the one the way we had before, same light conditions, we can copy this, right? We can copy this Lumetri Color and apply it to any of the other scenes. So if I want to apply it to this one, I can just right click, paste attributes. And it's going to ask me, do you want to add the Lumetri Color? Do you want to add the opacity attribute? It tells me the attributes it currently has, and you can check the ones you want to bring with you. I'm going to say yes, and just like that, it changed it automatically. So I'm going to undo that. I mean, that's really interesting, right? So that is a really fast way to just match these color palettes to begin to look a little closer together if you're building a sequence, right? So what if I want to change this though? It's a little bit too blue for me. I want to try to do a little bit of a more happier, I would say. You can do different hues of blues by creating that S curve on each channel and layering them. So layering is kind of an important element here. And at first, sometimes it can look a little funky and then it starts to look so good together. This really gives me Kodak film edit vibes. I don't know how else to say that. Right? So yeah, okay. So if I want to change this also to this edit, then I would do the same thing. Copy and paste those attributes, right? And watch what happened here. Something went off, something got really crazy. Well, no need to panic. We've got a reason for this. If we go to our effect controls, we're going to find that we now have two Lumetri colors, right? So one of them is too much. So you can remove it and we're back to where we were, or we can keep the other one that we wanted to paste, and that is the old edit. I mean, the new edit. I believe that's the new edit. Yes. Right? So that's how that ends up happening if you ever run into that. So what we're going to do here, I like this color. I think that looks really cool, but I want to explore more of the curves with you. And I want to revisit some of these kind of clean palettes. I love that this has these moments to work with that have a lot of blue in them. So I love this scenario here. Right? So I'm going to go into this section. I'm going to hit Shift I. So that's my new work area. Now we're going to work here. Shift O. Sorry, just O, no shift. Forget the shift. So then we have these moments here that we can start playing with. And so you can see here, there's no color. Let's start setting some foundations, right? So what we could do moving forward, a pro tip here, we're going to go to Lumetri Color. We're going to do basic correction right here and set S-Log3, right? That's fine. And we can do maybe that one. I think that S-Log is better. So we can do that. And what we can do from here is go to Effect Controls. And you're going to find it right there, right? We can save that S-Log as a preset, so that the next time I know that this is my preset for Sony S-Log2. So that instead of going to the Lumetri Color and adding it from the drop down menu, I can choose it from my effects. So let's say I remove it here. I can open effects and go into this section and go into Sony, whatever I named it, Sony S-Log2, which is under my presets. I can just click and drag it over to the timeline, right? And there you go. I just added my S-Log, and that can basically work for any edit, any step of your edit that you wish to save as a preset. So if you have a step in the edit, for example, that feels to you like, how do I say? For example, in the beginning, I may correct all reds. If you want to save how you correct all reds in a preset and then just drop it and apply it to the timeline, that is an option, because you can always save the Lumetri Color effects from your effect controls. So that's the goal here, right? to have a more recognizable workflow that you can, now that you're in the discovery process, you can start to see that there's a workflow that works for your color editing. Okay, so let's continue here editing this scene, right? So we're going from here. Oh, Shift I. This is why I set my workspace. So we can go right to the beginning. Something like this. I think I start walking around here, actually. Hello, where'd you go? Okay, so let's leave it there. So far, we've only got that S-log, but we are in the curve section, right? So, hi, Barbara, welcome. We have Clever. Hey, folks. I'm loving seeing more people on the chat. Awesome. So let me know if you have any questions so far. Remember, we are now in the curves section exploring different clips. So I am here and we're doing from the foundation to now incorporating curves. So let's go back to our Lumetri Color, which I've set as Shift 7 here on my shortcuts, which by the way, you can always find here, keyboard shortcuts. If I go into Lumetri Color, you can see there, Shift 7, okay? Best way to do all of these workflows. So if I go here, I can go into curves, and instead of using this graph within curves, we're also going to find something else in here. We're going to find this graph. Do you see this? Really cool because it has all of the colors in it that also exist within your video clip. And we're going to be able to use it much like a graph. We're able to also navigate this. Let me select the clip. I think I have it selected. There you go. We're going to navigate this one by one because they are definitely different from each other. So let's go over here. So we have hue versus saturation. We have hue versus saturation, hue versus hue, hue versus hue. And we also have hue versus luma and luma versus saturation. We're not going to worry about saturation versus saturation right now, but let's work on these, right? When I think about this, I think about hue versus saturation. I think about it jokingly, like if saturation's only goal was to give more saturation to hue. So it's either more saturation or less saturation. And that is the combative element, right? And this one is more hue or less hue in a different variety, I would say. So let's try that out. So in here, I can go a few different ways. I can begin by just selecting the entire line and modifying the colors of my scene based on the placement that I navigate in this color wheel, more or less, right? Like color line, color spectrum. So if I'm in this blue and I go up, it starts to navigate the graph on the left that has a warmth color. So that is the crossing point. Isn't that interesting? So then if I go into the blue is going to be the best example because we can truly, truly see it here. But if we go here more to the right, we start to see those hues cross paths with yellow and green and blues. So there's a lot of opportunity for different tonalities within this graph, right? You can see there how that starts to look. Oops. Totally different, right? So I can see before, after. Much better. Now, if we want to isolate any of those, and remember, this is based on the hue versus hue. So that's the tonality of your color. If we want to do that for hue and saturation here, and we navigate this, we're going to be adding or removing saturation, which is color, essentially. Vibrance is a little bit different. So if we navigate it like this, you can see how it can go even completely to black and white, essentially, at this point. So you're going to go around there. And I think I like that. I think that looks really, really cool. And that's how you navigate curves. And also the section that often gets sort of lost is hue and saturation curves. Really, really fun to play with. Okay, so we're gonna close in here with effects. So effects is gonna be a different parameter since it doesn't live within the Lumetri Color space. But as you can see, saving presets has potential to communicate with Lumetri Color quite a bit. So as a result, the folks that programmed this program decided to create presets for color within the preset section. So within the effects panel. So let's go into the effects panel and see what opportunities do we have to use the effects panel to change color values. And some color values can get really funky and really fun. So let's jump on that. Let's do that. All right. So let's pick one of these here so you can begin to see how we arrive at some of these hues. Let's go to Shift 5 and start to explore some of these colors. I'll reset this for us to play with. Same with. That's fine. Okay. So I'm doing good here. We feel good. There's a lot of different variations that we can achieve in Premiere with the Lumetri Color panel. And now we're going to explore the effects panel. So if I have this image, for example, I might go to the effects panel, Shift 6, and I grab this Sony S-Log preset that I just created for myself. And boom, fairly easy. That was too easy, actually. I need to have more fun than just that. So I'm going to search for color here. And I get a few options actually within this section. This doesn't get any bigger here, but within this section, I get a few options. I have brightness and contrast. I have Lumetri Color, of course. Things like tint. We have 4 color gradients, which can get really, really funky, actually. And we have things like color key, which you may be familiar with because it removes color to leave a window to something else. So let's see how we can achieve some color changes using color effects. So instead of using the Lumetri Color, I'm going to challenge myself to use different things within the effects. Let's drop in a brightness and effects. Let's drop in, I'm like shopping. Let's drop in a tint. Let's drop in a 4 color gradient. There you are. 4 color gradient. Let's drop in, oh, the photo is gone. It's gone, y'all. Okay, well, we're going to do a couple things for it. I think that's about right. I don't think I'm missing one. That's fine. So let's go into the effect controls, which is essentially where we control our effect. We're going to start by turning off the ones that we just brought in so we can edit each one individually. Okay. So we're going to edit, we've got brightness and contrast here. So yes, you can do brightness and contrast in the curve section. You can do it in the basics section of the Lumetri Color. But what's interesting is that if you establish a brightness and contrast that you really like, you can then save your own preset from here. So there's a lot of different opportunities to just speed up your workflow in this section of our video, of our stream today. So let's see here. So a little bit of contrast, very subtle, very much universal contrast. So it's not just targeting shadows. It's not just targeting highlights. That's what I mean by that. It's not a specific adjustment. It's a universal application. So then we go here into tints. Let's turn off this one and let's turn on tints. And it's going to show you how cool it is. Look, when you select a tint, you can choose to add a different hue to it. So let's say we add a little bit of pastel yellow to create a bit of an amber color to it. You can choose the amount that that tint is being applied to something like this. So if you have like a wedding photo, you want to create a bit of a hazy look, you can do that with effects like this. But it's just an opportunity for a lot of other things, I think, also. It's just about the amount of color you add. So if you want to create maybe a monochromatic effect on your video for a second, you know, like for something that you want to emphasize, that can be very attractive and very intriguing. It's not just about doing color corrections in a way that is technical but also creative, right? So a bit of difference there. So then let's try to play with I try to give myself some parameters even as I'm experimenting. So I might say something like a warm color, target all warm colors, and replace them with a bit of a bluish tint. I'm thinking of like how my portrait photos tend to look like. Or that green was giving me something cool, you know? And then you start to go down or up from there. And that's a really quick way to add color differentiation and style to your video without even really stepping into the Lumetri Color. So let's add a little bit of more contrast here, just a little bit more. And so if you turn these off, you can see how different that actually looks, right? And when we come to the 4-color gradient, that one can get really funky, y'all. I don't know if I have time for that, but let's try. Let's try. Should we try? Don't know. I always do this. I don't know why. But let's say I have this one here, right? And I want to remove this Lumetri. And I want to add this 4-color gradient. I'm going to turn it on. But first, I do need to add effects. And we're going to add that preset that I made, Sony S-Log2. Might get a shortcut for that. I might say that's my default preset and I can add it that easily. I can also do that down the road. So let's go back to effect controls. All right. Effect controls is going to give me this 4-color gradient that I applied in here earlier. So this looks a little gnarly, right? But things change, folks, once you start playing with modes, right? So you got modes there. But yet still those colors are too much for me. I might not love it. And you know, you can always lower the opacity. But what's the point here? Like if it's something, it starts to look a little psychedelic, maybe could be a perfect fit for maybe a show, maybe under, you know, night videos, or you're creating a documentary about carnivals. So maybe if I add it to this scene, it could be cool too. So let's go to Shift 5 and actually, remove this Lumetri color and add this Lumetri color. So if I add that color to this, look how cool that looks, right? That was pretty immediate to create that effects. And mind you, this doesn't have our S-Log. So let's add in our S-Log. And it gets even more vibrant than it was before. But we can always reduce that, right? And it could be quite interesting to see it go from purple to green. Now, if we go back to the other one and attempt to do a bit of a natural effect, you might want to then change these hues to a more natural color palette. So you might want to do something that is closer to natural hues, not these very vibrant colors. So a way that I like to achieve that is I like to think of, for example, I'll find a pastel, only web colors, give you pretty smaller range of color palettes. So I'll find myself a pastel. Pastel, by the way, are colors that add white, and tones, pastels. Yeah, it's like a tint versus a tone, which adds black. So I'm going to find that pastel. Okay. And then in the warm section. And then I'm going to go in here and select that same hue with the eyedropper. And select a color that's a little bit darker, but still in the warm section. So something like this. Maybe an orange. I think I want like an orange. Right? And then copy that one again and start to kind of navigate down this and find a blue color, or an opposite, a darker color. Something cooler, essentially. And that can start to shift the possibilities of how the filter blends in this scene too. Do you see that? So that feels like more natural color palette than the one we had before that felt a little bit more, I wouldn't say, maybe artificial. And what I mean by natural versus artificial is natural, it can be found that those lighting conditions may be easily synonymous to like the natural environment that you might find, like artificial lights you might actually find in nature. Gosh, that sounds so convoluted, but basically you would be able to find this. If I do it the other way, is obviously a stylistic choice. And that's the way I go about it, folks. Now that I like this, for example, I might say, gosh, this is so pretty. I might want to save this for color gradient for the future. So I can do that again. And this time I won't have to mitigate through what color palette do I want. This is in fact my pastel choice. I'm gonna call it my pastel choice, really. I don't know. Pastel color carnival. Maybe I call it that. And I don't know, I never write a description. Maybe I should. So that's kind of the way I go about it. Alejandro says, you have to be careful with color management, but you can achieve great results with the advice. Sin Lagos gives us, thank you, Alejandro. I'm so glad. You do have to be very subtle. I'm pushing the gamut here because it's an experimental phase where I'm uncovering how many ways can you get creative with post editing, because there are a lot of folks who maybe never get to cross that threshold because we get stuck on, and I've been kind of guilty of that too. We get stuck on the technical part, which is, you know, it's understandable, but it's a phase of many other things, right? I just love this scene so much. It's so pretty. And I think there's more to say here, folks. I think if I wanted to continue to play with this and actually add all of the, let me zoom this in. If I wanted to continue to play with this and add all of our practices here today, so we were able to explore match, right? Color wheels and match, super cool. We're able to explore curves and all of the different properties within curves. There's so much more to dive into when it comes to that, and I absolutely love it. And I'm learning what is the right foundation for some colors to be more successful as well. So we learned a lot about S-Log, and there's so much more there to dive into. So hopefully we get to uncover so much more here, folks. And finally, we were able to play around with presets, which are an interesting secret weapon that you can utilize to just really speed up your workflow in the color editing space. Color editing facet. So this has been super exciting, folks. I am so glad to have joined you today because I love color editing for my photography, and I absolutely love doing color editing in these new spaces now with that in mind, with all those techniques that I've acquired through another Adobe program. So that's so awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here on the chat. I hope to see you next Monday. And remember that I am also streaming over on YouTube. So check out my streams on design and photography on my YouTube channel at Senlagos and here on Adobe Live. So thank you so much for being here with me. See you next time.